Welcome to Porch Play Chats, sponsored by the American Association for the Child's Right to Play, or more affectionately and shortened title of IPA USA. IPA USA is the USA affiliate of the International Play Association, and as part of our efforts to promote play, we have introduced Porch Play Chats, and we have over 200 of them now that are all available to you for free to listen at your leisure. You can find all the Porch Play Chats if you go to our website at ipausa.org, and up in that top right-hand corner, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and magically every Monday morning, a new Porch Play Chat will appear in your feed. Be a friend on our Facebook page, and you can also access Porch Play Chats there. Follow us on Instagram, and we do little snippets of Porch Play Chats to get your interest, or subscribe to Spotify, which is free to you. And all the Porch Play Chats will be going up on Spotify. There's several already there, but there's 200 of them. So we're uploading them as we have time. I'm Deb Lawrence, and I'm president of IPA USA. And with me on the porch today is Maxwell Hartt. Max, you want me to call you Max or Maxwell?
Max is fine.
Max is fine. So Max is an associate professor in the Department of Geography and Planning at Queen's University in Kingston. He's a former Fulbright Scholar and a member of the management board of the Shrinking Cities International. And you might go, oh my goodness, why is a person who is a geographer interested in play? Well, Max is going to tell us, because Max's topic is play across the lifespan. And his work at Queens is it's fascinating work, and some that is well needed. So Max, get us started. How can we sort of put in a nutshell what the description of play across the lifespan looks like, or what in your area of expertise is the geography piece of it?
Sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm absolutely thrilled. Yeah, it's great. I mean, I love explaining why I'm in a room that people don't expect me to be in. First of all, geography, we care about space. So I'm an urban planner and a geographer. And a lot of play happens with a spatial element, even if it's indoors, outdoors, whether it's solo play with other people, there's space involved. So whenever there's space, geographers are interested. And then with my urban planning hat on, we're the ones who make decisions, not always the best ones, but we make decisions about whether it's a playground, but we know play is way more than just playgrounds. It's also how you get to spaces and those in-between spaces that can be the most fun, that are unexpected. So I got really into this area of research and interest. One, I love to play. Because I think that's common for all of us who are listening or watching or subscribing or hosting. But what really, if I tell you a little story, it might be the easiest way to introduce it. I work with older adults and on age-friendly cities, and looking at the health and well-being of older adults, and how cities and space influence that. And I was working with colleagues from the UK and from Japan, and we were in Glasgow in Scotland. We were touring a housing estate, looking at some social housing, and it was beautiful. It was this amazing spot with all these places for people to congregate. And in the middle of the square was a pretty nice playground with a really nice slide. And it was a pretty formal affair. I had a suit on and all that kind of thing. And every time we kept coming in and out of the square, I kept kind of glancing back at the slide. It was calling my name. And eventually I couldn't help it anymore. I broke free from the group, ran across the grass, slid down the slide and came back, a little bit disheveled, a little bit embarrassed. But it was worth it. And afterwards, I kind of dawned on me that if we had been talking about children and children's health and well-being, of course we would have talked about the playground or play in general. But because we were talking about older adults, we didn't even discuss it at all. Someone might have mentioned a park bench or something like that. And I said, wait, I wanted to go on that slide. A lot of people probably want to go on that slide, or maybe something even better than that. And so I started digging into it. It was a new area for me research-wise, and I found out that it's not something that we talk about. It's everyone is aware of it in terms of, yeah, people play across the lifespan, but we didn't have any research on it. We certainly didn't have any policy trying to encourage it and really kind of questioning these models that we have. And so that started what's called the Aging Playfully project, which is now in its third year here at Queen's. We've been to Iceland, to Victoria, BC, to Florida, to Sao Paulo, Brazil. We have a new partner in Hong Kong, so that we see this momentum building up because everyone's like, yeah, of course. And so it's really exciting to be, bringing these worlds together. And we're not suggesting this is something new. People have been playing forever, as we know, people of all ages. But it's not something we necessarily pointed at and gave a name or had something to talk about when we were talking about all this policy around people aging, and about how our lives are going to look in the future.
Well, and I think what is so beautiful about your work is that it is providing thoughtful space
Yeah.
for this conversation to happen
Yeah.
as an aging adult. I want to have places that are that cater to a variety of age groups, but are accessible by someone who's getting older, right?
Absolutely.
And so if could you talk to us a little bit about what that might look like? And of course, based on the population, based on the city, based on the country, but what are you seeing in the research that would inform the planning piece of
Yeah.
a geographer?
Absolutely. So yeah, I think one of the more really interesting studies we did was a photo voice study in Victoria. That's where you give people either cameras or just their smartphones, and you give them some instructions, and they go out, they take pictures, and they come back. We print the pictures, and then we have focus groups, and we kind of chat about them. And the pictures are really just to get that conversation going about a real place-based, tangible element of someone's life. And so we asked them to take pictures of things that motivate people to play or that kind of suppress play in their own day-to-day life. And in terms of the actual pictures, it was obvious things like, if there's a really busy highway or road, it's not nice for anyone. If the path wasn't accessible or there was no path, some people talked about, I used to go over here, but now I can't get there anymore. So those things we weren't surprised by. What became really, to me, the most interesting thing is the bigger themes we know about play from the research about the idea of freedom, the idea of creativity, of creating a new world. So a lot of themes around even ageism being like, well, play is a way to escape. We know this. It's an emancipation from day-to-day life. And so some people who need that the most might be people who feel really boxed in. And unfortunately, as a society, especially Western society, we have a pretty narrow range of what's socially acceptable for an older person to do. Some people don't care about that range and they do what they want to do. But in terms of a lot of people, it's pretty narrow of what's, an acceptable thing and an acceptable thing to do in public. So what came from it really was people, flexibility was huge. People want room to do what they want to do.
Mhm.
And so thinking from a planning lens, the idea of spending money from a municipality, which municipalities never have enough money. And so you
Right.
really need to be careful. So if you build a baseball diamond or even a pickleball court or some kind of monofunctional, a single use area, it's hard to undo that if a few years later it's not popular anymore. And so just being really careful about space and then really letting it be adaptable because as we know with play, everyone has a different form of play. And even within themselves, the context matters, the day of the week matters, that morning, it all changes. It's all ever changing, which is a beautiful thing, but it makes it hard to plan for. Um, but I do think that idea of freedom, listening to the community, what do people actually want from their space? And it'll mean a lot of different things. I'll keep going for one more second. One of the things that was really interesting about sensory experiences. So we wrote a paper about this, talking about how people's senses change over time.
Mhm.
Sometimes in the popular imagination of the world, we think about senses declining over time. I think senses change over time, and that's an important difference. And so one being that as people get older, a lot of people, noise impacts them differently. So traffic noise is actually a lot worse for someone who's older, and it can really be quite disorienting. But they actually might get more pleasure out of being, say, in nature and natural noises than someone who's younger because their senses have changed. And the same goes for smell and even taste. There's another project about lickable cities that I wouldn't necessarily engage with that one, but the
Oh
idea
my.
that, yeah, I think, but having an understanding of how the kind of physical changes happen and then preferences and just not having assumptions is the first thing. And so these conversations and having conversations with policymakers, planners, older adults, people, everyone just being like, wait, we're going to do something here in this public space or in this pathway. We have to check what we're assuming about what might be best for some imaginary person that we're thinking of, which is probably a much more complicated person than we think it is.
But and I think older people sometimes feel isolated. Sometimes, they may not be as mobile
Yeah,
as they wish they could be or as they were in their younger years, but they also might feel like they're trapped
Yeah.
in wherever they're living because of that lack of mobility, or maybe they don't drive anymore and they can't go to a place.
Right.
And so it's also, I think, really important that when we are thinking about urban communities or suburban communities or even rural communities, that somehow or another they're accessible, right? That
Absolutely.
people can be picked up and taken to those places, or that in housing developments or in senior developments, if that's where people may be choosing to live, that there is something planned
Yeah.
that is right there so that
Right there.
don't have to
Yeah.
worry about all these other barriers, because I see the barriers being higher uh, of higher importance than even those barriers. I
Yeah.
can't play because I can't get there, right? But
Absolutely.
one of the things that you said I think is so important, that it goes for everybody:
It does. Yeah.
choice.
Yeah.
They need space,
Yeah.
and they need things that they're interested in doing, just like children.
Just like everyone, right? And I think you really nailed it, though. I think that one thing that's specific about older adults that I think when I started doing this, I was like, wow, this fits so perfectly because it is the time in life where people are most likely to see their physical world shrink, like you mentioned, because of the mobility challenges or not being able to drive anymore. Their social world could shrink as, they're widowed or friends leave or they retire, and that changes their networks. And then also their cognitive world, how they think about their space because of those restrictions. So for someone, it might go, the whole world was their world, and now it's only their city. But someone else, it might have been their city, now it's their neighborhood, or their neighborhood, now it's their block, or their building, or their own apartment. And this is something that happens, and it's more prevalent later in life. And for some people, that's 55. Some people, that's 105. There's no number. But I
Right,
think
right.
that, yeah, thinking about that is like, okay, really, we've got to take that into consideration. We know that loneliness and social isolation are incredibly damaging. The famous quote is being lonely is like smoking 15 cigarette packs of cigarettes a day, I think is it's just incredibly bad physically for you. So one thing that I was really excited about this project is because there's all kinds of amazing aging and age-friendly research out there. And I've been lucky to be part of some and lead some and be part of some interesting projects. But so much of it was focused on preventative and risk averse. And I think, and that's nothing against that. It's so important to think about how do you, think about these barriers. But I wanted to go the opposite, say like, well, what's encouraging us to come out? What's
Right.
people like, what are people excited about? And I think you can have both those things.
Mhm.
So one thing I've been really excited about lately is the idea of like later life risky play. So taking the risky play concept, it's like, when do we need to push the boundaries and stay in tune with our physical and social boundaries the most? Well, it's early life and late life. If you take no risks and then you trip on that curb. And so I was like, we need risk. We just need, same as the risky play literature, we need appropriate risk and we need to be aware of it. So there's so many parallels, but you're so right about, the time in your life when you need to be getting out and staying active mentally, physically, socially. And just to have fun. Like, I think that's the other thing is that we don't need to have a reason, a pragmatic reason. It doesn't need to like help hospitals or healthcare. Play is play,
It's
right? Like,
it's play, and
yeah,
it's joyful, right? And
exactly.
self-chosen, and you play as long as you want, and when you're done, you're done. So
Exactly.
my 96-year-old father-in-law lives with us, and his mobility is becoming more and more limited. My God, he's 96. Hello, if I look half as good as he
Yeah,
does when he's
honestly.
96, I'll be thrilled.
Yeah.
But one of his play um, playful things is going to the community center every Tuesday to play pinochle for 3 hours.
Yeah.
It it is a social. I mean, he's with us all the time, of course.
Yeah.
So we're talking, having conversation, and he's watching the Phillies baseball, by the
Okay.
way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very, very much a Phillies fan. But that is a peer group
Yeah.
that he is able to go, and it's joyful. But
Yeah.
he can't drive anymore, so we
Yeah.
take him.
Yeah.
So he has us who
Yeah.
will get him there, and then of course we go on errands and things, and and that's all wonderful. But it is that barrier of, if he was 96 and not able to have someone who could help him get to someplace,
Yeah,
then that becomes a barrier for enjoyment. I mean,
absolutely.
and dad is cognitively
Yeah,
all there. It's
yeah,
truly amazing.
yeah.
So,
And
um,
and that's probably keeping it. Like, I mean, that's, for, I'm not in a like other, like, that's just like, we all have our things that we do that we afterwards we're energized by, or we look forward to. And we know from the research that it's amazing that he has that, that he can assume he has a drive, right? Because
mhm,
if he had to ask every time, or we know if people have to pay for a taxi, even if they can afford it,
mhm.
it seems frivolous. It seems like, you know what, this isn't a doctor's appointment. I'm not going to pester someone. When really, like, it could be more important than a doctor's appointment, to keep these things going. Um, and so I think, like, and everyone, I mean, I talk to usually has examples, and it's great. But unfortunately, a lot of people have, examples that aren't so happy either. And I think, unfortunately, in Canada, the US, and a few other places, we're in particularly bad position because of how we've built our cities.
Yeah.
Without a car in a lot of North America, it's pretty tough. It's still tough in Europe and other more dense places, but it's tough. And even things around wayfinding and dementia, like, I tease my in-laws sometimes. They live in a very, in my mind, typical suburb. And once I was there, and they found in my pocket of my running shorts, I had drawn a little map, because I don't like to bring a phone with me, but all the streets look the same to
Oh,
me. And
there
so,
you go.
and
Yeah.
I was like, if I got lost, and there was no real markers, because it was a development where all the houses are very, it's one of three models or whatever.
Mhm.
And I was like, that makes it difficult. So I think there's things in there too, where, like, not just about interactive play, but like playfulness of, like, why not have a polka dot house? Like, someone then might remember it, or like, we have a swing up front of our house, and I love when people stop of any age and swing on our swing, and hopefully people then remember, like, oh, I turn near the house with a swing, or whatever it might be.
Right, right. Or the big plant that's out front that I love, right? That flowers
Absolutely,
every
yeah,
spring. Any of those um, visual markers
yeah,
are what are so helpful when you might be easily, like, I have no sense of direction. I have never had a sense of direction. And when I lived in Colorado for 26 years, the mountains were always to the west, so I always knew which direction I
yeah,
was going. And then I moved to Pennsylvania, and we don't have mountains where I live, so it became more challenging. So thank
yeah.
God I have a compass on my phone, so I'm
Yeah.
able to
Well, yeah,
find my way that way.
and I think then all those things, just to me, are more likely if you start, if you put the effort into putting a little library or a really nice plant or whatever else, there's more likelihood that you'll be in your front lawn.
Mhm.
And so there was a paper recently that they called, the North American house was a mullet. It was business in the front and a party in the back, which I
Oh,
quite fun, the landscaping mullet. And I thought, that's like pretty, the front is
see?
traditionally for show, and
Mhm.
then the backyard is where you have your activity. And
Mhm.
I think we need to spend more time in our front yards for those of us who live in kind of suburban communities. And then
Yeah.
people will see you, they'll stop, they say hello, you might have a lemonade stand. You start to see that life come back, and
Mhm.
that brings people out. It also helps us take care of each other, whether you don't see someone for a couple days or weeks, or if there's a pandemic, like, so all these things that, like, you know, once upon a time were there, but it's like a lot of play and getting out for children. Less and less is happening necessarily at a community level in the front yard, ball hockey or whatever it might be.
Yeah, or even in the streets. Now we live in a townhome community, and there are lots of children here, and I
Yeah,
love it.
yeah,
And we have a playground just like one house over
oh,
that my
beautiful.
grandchildren love.
Yeah,
But I put sidewalk chalk in a
yeah,
little bucket out there so that they
yeah,
could go, and if they were on the playground, they could find their sidewalk chalk and they could go, we'll draw on the sidewalk.
that's great.
And but so little things like that that make
Absolutely,
people feel more belonging and welcome in,
absolutely.
in an area. But of course, that's a child focus. But our the kids in this neighborhood ride their bikes up and down
Yeah,
the street, and I put some sidewalk chalk out in the front of the house, and a mom brought her child over, and they were doing sidewalk chalk in front, and
oh,
that's exactly what,
absolutely,
like, that community needs. It's when we
absolutely.
is that we
And I
lock
and I
front
and I
yard.
really I really think that, you know, the conversations I'm trying to have now are really about, I I don't love sidewalk chalk. I don't like getting my hands dirty. But like
That's okay.
but I will jump, I will go through every like skip rope, every pattern. If I come, whether I have my daughter with me or not, there's no question I'm going to participate. And I
Mhm.
think that, in my world, like a beautiful world would be, yeah, you have sidewalk chalk out, and one day, two older people going for a walk decide to do a little drawing. Like,
Absolutely.
because there's nothing essentially youthful about chalk on
So
the ground.
wonderful.
Like it can
Yeah.
be anything, and it could write a nice message, and so that's where it's like a lot of that's just social, it's social barriers and social constructions of what it means to be a certain age. And
Mhm.
but I do think once you saw, like, if someone saw one person do something that might seem a little bit silly or whatever else, all of a sudden this idea of permission comes in that we know about from play research as well, and it's like, oh, you know what? Yeah, I might do that too. And then
Interesting.
all of a sudden, some of these things that we have in place aren't just, the same thing can work for anyone across the lifespan. Um, there's a ways to go for some of that, I think, and it's very community to community and individual. And I'm not saying everyone should want to do that, but like the idea that someone can at least consider it and not
Mhm.
just assume that that's not for me,
Mhm.
is the conversations I've been trying to have. And then when I do my, the grants and other, it's arguing about the health and the benefits, but really to me it's about just the joy and the play, and how that, everyone can experience that, and in different
Well,
ways.
I think people would be so much healthier. I sometimes I'll go to Target or something and I'll buy bubbles and I'll
Yeah,
just stick bubbles out in the rocks by the sidewalk. It's amazing what happens because children go, oh, this is, oh, look, there's bubbles.
yeah,
And I don't care if they take them.
yeah, yeah,
That's the goal,
yeah,
is for someone to play with them, right?
yeah,
And so it is this, I think it's this, oh, well, we couldn't do that. Oh,
yeah,
our community wouldn't let us do that. But
absolutely.
we're, at the conference in Greenville in the fall,
Yeah,
we're in a, like, Heritage Green is like a complex of, it's
yeah,
their art center
okay,
of Greenville. So here's the children's museum, and then here's the art museum, and then here's the history museum, and then here's the library, and then here, so there's sidewalks and green
yeah,
space.
yeah,
And so we're trying to figure out, okay, what can we do to make it playful
yeah,
to go in between? And it's all like a 2.5 minute walk from each other, but it's
yeah,
still, there are sidewalks there. So we have a whole team that's working on how can we make these sidewalks playful
that's great.
as we go around and through. And those are little things that adults can do
Oh,
based on how they feel and what their comfort level is as we're moving through this space. And so I think there's so much. And what I love about uh, your discipline is that it is an important discipline that is integrated into so many other
yeah,
areas. And so if we just look at other disciplines and other um, professions, we see such overlap, but
yeah,
we're also like this,
yeah.
that sometimes it's difficult to get outside that lens. And Matt, that's why it's been so important to have you.
Thank you. And
Now,
it's absolutely true.
yeah,
One of the best things about it is, yeah, we hopefully draw upon all these things, and we're connectors, hopefully. And yeah, I mean, I love these examples. And I think that thing I'll add, I know we're at the end, is that some
that's all
places
right.
you actually can't do that. So technically, in the city I live in, you can't chalk the sidewalk.
Oh no.
There's a municipal bylaw, and so there's these and like nothing happens, but we actually, some of them, like, we have all these rules, and like, and they're for the worst case scenario, obviously it's for hate crimes or whatever else, and so like, but there's all kinds of rules, and if you look deep into them, and it's just like, I think making a point to turn some of those around and then celebrating it. So I'm excited. I love your idea. I had never thought of putting out sidewalk chalk, so today or tomorrow I'm gonna go buy a whole bunch and make a sign outside, and my wife is going to be thrilled about it, because we love having it, and it's so nice to see. And I think that's such a nice thing to do, that people aren't going to be a help but stop. And we live near a park as well, so I love that idea so much. So I'm going to steal it from you,
Oh,
and
please.
use it at home.
Yeah. Spread the happiness
I will
around.
do, yeah.
So Max, thank you so much. Don't go anywhere while I close this out.
Sure.
So to learn more about IPA USA, please visit our website at ipausa.org. And until next time, keep on playing.